They say you never forget the sound of a motorcycle. But that day, what the bikers heard wasn't an engine. It was a knock. A small, nervous knock on a steel clubhouse door. Inside, 30 men went quiet. No one ever knocked on that door unless trouble followed. Tank, the president, nodded for someone to open it. And there she was, a tiny girl in a faded pink hoodie, one eye swollen and purple, clutching a wrinkled photograph. Her voice barely carried above a whisper. My mom was Officer Kelly Lawson. She was killed last week. No one said a word. Every man in that room had heard the news, the murdered policewoman, the shootout, the threats from the gang that claimed her life. They'd even heard that anyone who showed up to her funeral would be next. But none of them expected her daughter to show up here. Tank took a step forward, his boots heavy on the wood floor. Kid, you sure you're in the right place? She nodded once. Yes, sir. You're the devil's disciples. Yeah, he said slowly. That's us. The girl lifted the photograph of a smiling woman in uniform, arm around a much younger version of herself. Her funeral's tomorrow, she said. No one's coming. A murmur passed through the crowd. My grandma died last year. And all my mom's friends, they're scared. Her voice trembled, but she stood her ground. The men who killed her said they'd shoot anyone who goes. Tank frowned. And you came here? To us? She nodded again. Mom said you weren't a bad person. She said some of the best hearts were leather. That line hit the room hard. Men who'd spent their lives being feared suddenly found themselves speechless. She took a deep breath. Please. I don't want her to be alone. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. These were men who'd buried brothers, who'd stood in the rain while engines rumbled for the fallen. But a child asked them to stand up for a cop that was new. Tank looked down at her, then at the bruises on her face. You got anybody left, kid? She shook her head. Just her. He rubbed his beard, thinking. Finally, he said, wait here. The men followed him into the back room of their church, where decisions got made. The doors shut, muffling the sounds of their debate. She's a cop's kid, one man snapped. If we go to that funeral, we'll look like we're begging for forgiveness. Another growled, that gang meant it. You want bullets flying at a funeral? Tank let them talk. When the noise died down, he said quietly, you all remember when Officer Lawson stopped us last summer? She could have hauled us in. Instead, she told us to get our tail lights fixed and have a good night. Hammer nodded slowly. Yeah. Said we were too old to be causing trouble. Tank's voice softened. That's the kind of woman she was. Now her daughter's standing out there, asking for help. I don't care what patch we wear, that's something a man answers. Snake grunted. Even if it gets us killed. Tank's eyes hardened. Then we do it right. We ride in together. Nobody gets left behind. The room went quiet again, not the kind of silence from fear, but the kind that comes before a decision. Finally, Hammer spoke up. All in favor? One by one, rough hands went up. Every single one. When the door opened again, the little girl jumped. Tank stepped out, his expression softer now. He knelt in front of her. Emma, right? She nodded. We'll be there, kid, he said. All of us. Her lip quivered. Really? Tank gave a small smile. Really? Your mom won't be alone. For the first time that day, her bruised face lit up with something close to hope. And as she walked away, clutching that picture to her chest, not one man in that clubhouse could pretend his eyes weren't burning. Because sometimes, it takes a child's courage to remind grown men what it means to stand for something. That night, Tank couldn't sleep. The image of that little girl standing in their doorway kept replaying in his mind the bruises, the fear, the stubborn courage in her tiny voice. He'd seen men with guns show less bravery than that child with a photograph. By morning, the decision was made. Word spread through every chapter of the Devil's Disciples, then beyond. Calls went out to friendly clubs across 3 states, brothers they'd fought beside, and sometimes fought against. By sunset, phones were buzzing, and engines were roaring. Because news like this doesn't stay quiet long. A murdered cop. A daughter left alone. And a funeral under threat. Even rival clubs Iron Saints, Widowmakers, Road Dogs started calling. "What's this we're hearing, Tank? A kid asked you to ride?" "Yeah," he said. "She did. And you're doing it? Every damn one of us." There was a pause, then a familiar growl through the speaker. "Then count us in." By the next morning, Tank's phone was full of names of bikers from every corner of the state. It wasn't about colors anymore. It wasn't about turf. It was about a promise to a child who believed that people in leather still had good hearts. While word spread, Tank visited a small diner on the edge of town. Sitting across from him was Owen, one of the original club founders. "You really going through with this?" Owen asked, stirring his coffee. "Yeah," Tank said quietly. "You know what the gang said?" Tank nodded. "They don't scare me." Owen looked out the window. "They might. But that kid? She's got more guts than most men I know." That night, the clubhouse filled with the thunder of engines. Men arrived from miles away, weathered faces, patched jackets, arms crossed, waiting for orders. Tank stepped forward. "Brothers," he said, voice echoing. "Tomorrow morning, we will ride for Officer Kelly Lawson. Not because she was a cop. Because she was good. And because her daughter asked us to." He scanned the room. "She's 7 years old. Got hit in the face by somebody who thought fear keeps people quiet. But she came to us because her mom told her bikers to keep their word." A murmur rose from the crowd, quiet agreement, the kind that comes from men who've lost people too. Tank continued, "Now, I know the risks. You've heard the threats. But if fear keeps good people home, then the bad ones already won." He paused, eyes sharp. "So tomorrow, we show them what courage looks like." The room erupted, hands slapping tables, fists pounding the air, voices shouting in unison. "Ride for Kelly. Ride for the kid." Outside, the engines started one by one, until the whole street vibrated under the sound. That same night, at a rundown bar on the other side of town, another conversation took place. 3 men in black jackets leaned against a wall, their tattoos matching the symbol painted over Officer Lawson's memorial photo. "They really going through with it?" one asked. "Yeah," another replied. 200 bikers, maybe more." The leader smirked. "Let M. Makes it easier to find him all in one place." He crushed a cigarette beneath his boot. "Funerals tomorrow. Let's make it their last ride." Back at the clubhouse, Tank sat in the quiet after everyone left. The photo Emma had given him lay on the table, the officer smiling, arm around her daughter. He stared at it for a long time, then reached into his vest pocket and pulled out something small, a silver badge, bent and scratched. "Your mom earned respect," he muttered. "Tomorrow, we'll give her the rest." He set the badge beside the photo and whispered. "Rest easy, Officer Lawson. The disciples ride with you." The morning of the funeral broke cold and gray. A light mist hung over the town, soft as breath on glass. By 9 o'clock, the road to Riverside Cemetery began to hum low, deep, and steady. Engines. Hundreds of them. Tank led the procession, chrome glinting through the fog, followed by lines of leather and steel that seemed to stretch forever. Behind him rode men from every corner of the state. Devil's Disciples, iron saints, widowmakers, even the bandidos. Some had never spoken a word to each other before that day. But this morning, they rode as one. The funeral director froze when he saw them coming. Rows of bikes, colors shining, faces hard but solemn. It wasn't a gang rolling in. It was an army of respect. Emma stood near the graveside, clutching her foster mother's hand. When she saw Tank step off his bike, her face lit up in disbelief. "You came," she whispered. Tank took a knee beside her. "Told you we don't break promises." She nodded, eyes glistening. Mom would have liked this. As the service began, the two officers assigned for security looked around, speechless. They'd been told to expect maybe 10 people. Instead, 200 bikers stood shoulder to shoulder, engines cooling in the distance, heads bowed in silence. The pastor spoke about courage and sacrifice, about service and love. But it was Emma who brought the crowd to tears. She stepped up to the podium, her small hands gripping the paper she'd written on. "My mom was brave," she began softly. "She helped people, even when they didn't thank her. She told me to always look for the good in others, even when they look scary." Her voice trembled, but she went on. "She said bikers have big hearts." She was right. Every man there lowered his head. Even the ones who'd never cried in their lives. When it came time to lower the casket, Tank stepped forward. He placed his gloved hand on the lid and gave a slow, steady salute. Dozens of veterans among them followed. Then one by one, the bikers approached the grave, each laying down a club patch of small pieces of color and history from every club that had answered the call. When the last patch fell, the casket was covered in a quilt of unity reds, blacks, golds, blues. No gangs. No rivals. Just respect. That's when the sound of car doors broke the silence. 3 dark sedans pulled up to the edge of the cemetery. 5 men got out, wearing the same insignia that had been spray-painted on the police memorial weeks earlier. The crowd shifted. Emma's foster mother pulled her close. The bikers turned slow, deliberate, like a tide moving toward shore. Tank stepped forward, hands loose at his sides. "You boys lost?" he asked quietly. The gang leader smirked. "Nah. We came to make sure the message was clear." Tank's eyes narrowed. "It's already clear." He nodded once. And 200 bikers stepped in unison, forming a wall of leather and steel between the men and the little girl's mother's grave. The gang leader's smirk faded. He looked around, engines gleaming, fists tightening, every man silent and ready. He muttered something under his breath and turned back toward the cars. The doors slammed. Tires squealed. And just like that, they were gone. The 2 police officers exhaled in relief. One turned to Tank. "We couldn't have stopped them alone." Tank gave a small nod. "Didn't have to. Fear doesn't win today." After the crowd began to leave, Emma tugged on Tank's vest. "Wait," she said softly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope, worn and folded. "My mom wrote me this," she said. "Before she died. She said to read it when I was really sad." She unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "Dear Emma. If you're reading this, it means I can't be there anymore. But I want you to remember something. Don't judge people by how they look. Some of the best people I ever met wore leather jackets. They look tough, but their hearts are good. If you're ever in trouble and I can't help you, find the devil's disciples. Tell them your mom was Kelly Lawson. They'll take care of you. Love. Mom." When she finished, the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. The Tank swallowed hard, voice thick. "Your mom knew us better than most." Emma smiled through her tears. "She said you were good guys." He nodded slowly. She was right. 3 months later, Emma was adopted by her mom's partner and his wife. They brought her back to the Devil's Disciples clubhouse one Saturday afternoon. The men had a surprise waiting. Tank stepped forward, holding a thick envelope. "This is for you," he said. Inside was a certificate for a college fund, $15,000, raised by every club that had written that day. Emma gasped. "For me?" Tank nodded. "Your mom gave to people her whole life. It's our turn." She threw her arms around him, and for a moment, the toughest man in the county forgot how to be tough. From that day on, the disciples called her little sister. And every year, on the anniversary of her mother's death, the roar of engines filled the town again, not for fear, but for remembrance. Because those men had learned something that day. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's leather and chrome. Sometimes, it's a promise kept to a child who refuses to give up. And when anyone asked why 200 bikers showed up for one little girl, Tank always said the same thing. Because she believed we were the good guys. And we weren't about to prove her wrong. Time has a way of softening pain, but not erasing it. Months turned into seasons, and the story of the Devil's Disciples at Officer Lawson's funeral spread far beyond their town. News outlets called it a miracle. Locals called it redemption. But for the bikers themselves, it wasn't about headlines. It was about a little girl who reminded them what honor still meant. Tank kept the letter Emma had read that day. He framed it, hung it on the clubhouse wall beside a photo of Officer Lawson and Emma together, mother and daughter smiling, unaware of how their story would one day change so many lives. Beneath the photo, a small brass plate read, "Respect is earned. Kindness is forever." Every new member who joined the club had to stand before that wall and listen to the story. The rule was simple: you ride with honor, or you don't ride with us at all. It wasn't just a club anymore. It was a family. And every year, when spring came, the disciples rode again. They'd start from the clubhouse and ride to the same cemetery, laying fresh flowers at Officer Lawson's grave. Sometimes Emma came along a little older each year, helmet too big, riding on the back of Tank's bike, laughter mixing with the rumble of the engines. To the outside world, they were still the bad guys. But to one little girl, they were the heroes who showed up when no one else did. Tank never talked much about what happened that day. But when asked why he did it, he always gave the same quiet answer. Because someone has to stand up when others run. And that's what they did. They stood up for a mother who gave her life in service, for a daughter who refused to let her memory fade, and for a truth that outlives any rumor. Real strength isn't about fists or fear. It's about doing what's right, even when it's dangerous. So if you're watching this right now and you believe courage still matters, that kindness still counts, that fear doesn't get the last word, take a stand. Hit that subscribe button. Because every time you do, you're not just supporting a story. You're standing with everyone who chooses honor over hate. The villains of this story tried to silence a child with fear. But courage answered back with the thunder of 200 engines. And if you listen closely on quiet nights, when the wind's just right, you can still hear that sound echoing through the valley. Not of violence, but of loyalty, of family, of leather and chrome and a promise kept. Because sometimes, the angels don't wear wings. Sometimes, they ride Harleys. Years later, long after the headlines faded, a grown-up Emma rode back into town. The engines of a small convoy echoed behind her, Tank's bike among them, older now, paint chipped but still gleaming beneath the sun. They parked at Riverside Cemetery, the same place where everything began. Emma stepped off the bike and placed a single white rose on her mother's grave. She didn't cry this time. She smiled. Because she wasn't alone, she never had been since that day. Around her stood the men who had become her family. Some gray now, some slowed by time, but still wearing the same leather vests. Still keeping the same promise. Tank reached into his vest and pulled something from inside a small silver badge, worn smooth from years of handling. He placed it next to the rose. "She'd be proud of you, kid," he said softly. Emma looked up at him. "You taught me to be brave." Tank chuckled. "No," he said. "You taught us." They stood there in silence, the kind of silence that feels full of respect, of love, of history. Then, as the wind picked up, one by one, the bikers started their engines. The roar rolled across the hills, powerful and alive. Not angry, not wild but proud. A sound that carried the memory of a little girl's courage and the honor of a mother who gave her life doing what was right. And as they rode away, the camera would linger on the rose, on the badge, on the sunlight breaking through gray clouds. Because some stories don't end where the pain began. Some grow roots in courage, in brotherhood, in kindness. Officer Kelly Lawson's story became legend. Not because of how she died, but because of what her daughter's bravery awakened in the hearts of men who once thought redemption was beyond their reach. If you believe that goodness can come from the unlikeliest places. If you believe that courage still matters. And that even in darkness, decency rides on. Then take your stand right here, right now. Like this video, share it, and subscribe not for fame, not for numbers. But to remind the world that kindness is louder than fear. Because in a world that's forgotten how to stand together. This story proves something worth remembering. Angels don't always fly. Sometimes, they ride. This closing moment is designed to feel timeless, personal, and powerful like the moral heartbeat of the entire story, leading directly into your end screen and next video. The years rolled on, and the world kept changing, new roads, new riders, new faces under old helmets. But in every clubhouse that carried the mark of the devil's disciples, one story never faded. The story of a little girl who walked into a room full of outlaws, and turned them into heroes. Her courage became their compass. Her mother's legacy became their creed. And Tank, who'd once been known for fists and fury, became known for something greater, heart. Visitors still come by the clubhouse sometimes, curious about the framed letter on the wall. Tank always tells them, that's not just a story. That's a reminder. Then he taps the frame and says, this is why we ride. And every time new prospects join, they stand before that letter and hear the same words that changed a room full of bikers forever. Don't judge people by how they look. Some of the best hearts wear leather. Maybe that's the real legacy of Officer Kelly Lawson. Not the uniform, not the badge, but the belief that goodness still lives in unexpected places. In people the world misunderstands. In acts of bravery no one saw coming. And if you're watching this right now, maybe that belief is the reason you're here too. Because stories like this remind us that compassion isn't weakness, it's power. It's how we fight the darkness that tries to divide us. So take a stand with us. Hit that subscribe button if you believe courage still matters. Comment, ride for what's right. Because this channel isn't just about stories, it's about what they stand for. Together, we honor the people who prove that kindness can roar louder than hate. That respect can ride beside rebellion. And that sometimes, the fiercest warriors, are the ones who choose mercy. So wherever you are tonight, whether you ride or not, remember this. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they wear leather. Sometimes, they're covered in road dust and scars. And sometimes, they show up for a child when no one else will. That's not just a story worth telling. That's a legacy worth keeping alive. If you believe courage can outlive fear, hit that like button.